What do you do when something completely ordinary triggers a sensory issue and creates an uncomfortable, maybe even unbearable moment for someone you love? In this episode, I want to talk about the invisible work of navigating sensory sensitivities in a pretty insensitive world, and how we as families and neurodivergent individuals have to plan, adapt, avoid, and advocate in ways most people never see and will never truly appreciate. Hi, I'm Dr. Theresa Haskins, and welcome to Think Differently, the podcast that challenges the status quo and explores the power of neurodiversity to create a more inclusive and accessible world. Together, we will talk about everything from the value of different perspectives to the limitless potential of human beings. We'll explore how embracing differences can lead to endless possibilities and how you can maximize strengths to make a positive impact on the world. So sit back, relax, and join me as we get ready to think differently. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Think Differently. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to challenge the assumptions that inadvertently leave people out. It's often about the little things, some of the norms and situations we encounter that may result in a sensory sensitivity for someone we love. Oftentimes, these differences result in either opting out of events or could actually result in uncomfortable encounters that we find tricky to navigate. In addition to tricky navigation, it can also result in people making judgments and ultimately can lead to exclusion from future events and friendships. If you're not navigating sensory sensitivities in your daily life, it might sound unusual or even silly. But if you are, you know it's not. It can be really hard to understand the difficulties that are experienced by neurodivergent individuals, but it can even be harder to sometimes understand what it's like to navigate the world with sensory sensitivities. And if you're not navigating these issues in your own life, it might not sound real to you. And what we want to really think about is how can we be more aware so that we can help other people more effectively be included. This is something that my family deals with, and it might be something you're dealing with too. An easy example that often a lot of people have a hard time appreciating is in my family, we tend to avoid restaurants that serve French fries when we go out with other people. It's not that we don't like French fries. My children actually love French fries, but it's because they often serve ketchup as the standard condiment. And items like ketchup, salad dressing, the smell, the texture, actually just seeing it on the table, it's enough for my son to make an uncomfortable environment. And it creates a wall between him and the experience of the meal. There's also an issue in our family of seeing other people chew. Or worse, there's an aversion to being around people talking while chewing. This happens often when you're at a restaurant eating and talking. It's the exaggerated mouth movements, the sound, the visual. It's not just irritating, it's overwhelming for him. But more importantly to understand, it's not a preference he can control. It's an actual condition. There are two of them actually that are quite common among autistic and neurodivergent individuals, and they're called misophonia and misokinesia. And if you've never heard those words before, you should be aware that these are very real issues, and it's not as uncommon as you think. Misophonia is a condition where specific sounds that are repetitive or related to a human action like chewing or even odd breathing can trigger a negative emotional and physical reaction in the person observing it or hearing it. And then there's misokinesia, where a person has a strong negative reaction to physical movements like leg shaking or finger tapping, or yes, even repetitive mouth movements. And this experience is related to the neurological differences in wiring that leads to this heightened sensitivity to these visual and auditory stimuli. And it triggers an atypical response, right? This isn't a typical response. And if you've never heard of these conditions, you're not alone. But what you need to know is, while we can all get irritated by an annoying sound or someone's repetitive movements, for some individuals, it actually leads to dysregulation and physical discomfort. And so even when we understand this is a real phenomenon and explain it to others, people tend to minimize things when they don't understand them or it doesn't seem to suit the situation. So we'll hear things like, would you stop overreacting? It's just ketchup. Or you can't control how other people eat or what other people eat. And technically that's true. You as an individual, we all have the right to eat however we want, whatever we want, wherever we want. But it's also deeply dismissive to the other person who's saying they're being negatively affected by the overall experience. And because what many people don't see is how hard we're working to manage that moment. So everyone's trying to eat and have a good time. We want to keep our son engaged. We want to make sure he eats too. And most importantly, we want to prevent a sensory shutdown in a public space. So this is the part that matters. This isn't about controlling others and what they do. We're looking at it from potentially the wrong lens. Flipping the script, it's about helping somebody regulate their environment so that they can stay present in the moment and everyone can have a positive experience. In these situations, it takes a partnership to reduce or remove the stimuli that's causing the unwanted reaction. Now, I understand that the request to remove ketchup from the table may sound weird to some people or even rude. And I understand, as I said before, that everyone has the right to eat and live how they want. So we often try to soften the request. We'll tell people or say something like, hey, just so you know, our son has a really strong aversion to ketchup. That's really it. We just make the statement, not as a command, not a demand that they give it up, but as a cue, a nudge, a chance for them to go, oh, maybe I'll opt out of ketchup today. That maybe without having to directly ask them, they'll make the concession for this meal. Not every meal in their life, just this meal with us. I do believe when we talk to people, they hear us. And I know that most people don't mean harm. But honestly, they usually carry on like normal. They proceed with their order, the ketchup stays on the table, and my husband and I are the ones left scrambling. Then they observe our, activity and will say something along the lines of, is it really that big of a deal if I have ketchup? As if we hadn't just talked about it. And everyone knows my son's autistic. And we told them he has a strong aversion. And then they seem surprised or off-put by the reaction and outcome. So ultimately, as a family, we're left to deal with it. We rearranged the seating. We try to gently shield my son's view from the offending item with menus or different things. Or sometimes we just ask him to hang in there until it's over. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But in the end, it's not an ideal outing for everyone. And I get it from other people's perspectives. It might look like some sort of overreaction. It might seem a lot of effort for just ketchup, but it's not just ketchup. It's a small thing that becomes a big thing when it's not acknowledged. And the hard part is we'll never ask anybody to give anything up. We really just hope people will catch the drift. We'll hope they'll make the small choice. Skip the ketchup, move it aside, say no problem. That tiny concession would mean the world to us. Not because we expect people to bend to our differences, but because we'd love to have people meet us halfway some of the time. But I have a contrast to this. Not too long ago, my son was invited out to dinner with a friend who's also autistic. And they made the plan to go to a burger place. Easy, right? Tons of fun. They were so excited because they both like Red Robin. Awesome. But when I found out about it, I knew where this event was headed. Burgers mean fries, and fries mean ketchup. And ketchup for our son isn't just gross, it's a bit unbearable. And so the smell, the look, the texture, if someone else uses it nearby, he might stop eating altogether. His whole body tightens up, he disengages, not what we're looking to have happen when he's out with his friends. So I made a call to the mom, and I asked if we could reconsider the location. Maybe can we not do burgers? It's a little hard for us because our son really doesn't like ketchup and it freaks him out. And because she also has a child with autism, with her own aversions, she got it. And she's like, done. We pivoted, we picked a new place, they understood the issue. Did we have a perfect event when we went out? No. Somehow ketchup still made its way to the table, but we all recognized the problem and worked together to tuck it out of sight. Brain sat farther away from the offending eater. We set up a menu barricade. No one made a thing of it. There was no judgment. And the moment was not an undoing of the entire outing. We worked together. It was great. And that's what makes a difference. Not that someone understood everything, but that they respected what we shared with them and worked with us to make the situation work for everyone. So it's not just about the ketchup. It's just about being seen, being respected, and still being wanted after those events. It's not about restriction, but rather it's about consideration. And this isn't just parenting. This is advocacy in everyday life. If you've ever lived through moments like this and felt judged, you're not alone. I see you, because we've experienced these types of situations too. And I believe people love the idea of inclusion, right up until it interferes with their way of being and their routine. And they'll say they support neurodivergent people and they love my ideas, but they're unwilling to shift a meal or change a plan just so that we can keep things moving in a positive forward direction. That's not inclusion. That's barely tolerance at best. So I also want to challenge who gets to be comfortable in every situation anyway. You don't have to be autistic to experience sensory overload. You don't have to be neurodivergent to need support sometimes. But there's a difference. Most neurotypical people are empowered to say, this isn't for me and I opt out. And for whatever reason, that's usually respected. But counter, neurodivergent people are often told you just need to get used to it. This is how the world works. You need to adapt. Deal with it. It's damaging and it's dismissive. We send the message, you can be different, but only the kinds of different I'm comfortable with. Well, that's not tolerance. That's trying to enforce conformity to your ideals. And the ways of being that, my friends, is what's considered conditional acceptance. And when people say they support your child, but they don't show up when it matters, when they comment on your Facebook post, your son's so amazing, you're such a great mom, but they haven't invited you over in years. When they say they understand autism, but dodge direct interactions with your family or just stop including you. If you felt that, if you're tired of the performative online support that never translates into real-life connection, you're not alone. I'm with you. We've had friends who used to invite us over all the time. We'd host, they'd host, our kids played together. We thought there was a rhythm, a relationship, a sense of mutual care. And then slowly it shifted. They'd still come, but fewer would show. The invites started to space out until they stopped altogether. But you'd see a birthday party online, a dinner gathering, a holiday brunch, and you realize you weren't just forgotten, you weren't included. No explanation, just absence. And yes, people have every right to decide who's in their circle, but that doesn't mean it doesn't sting. Because you start wondering if the reason people back away is because your family or child made them uncomfortable, or because you didn't fit their definition of how we do things in easy. That's the thing about difference. People are fine with it until it requires something of them or changes how they expect things to be. And I'm going to tell you, it's heartbreaking when your kid asks about people who no longer engage with you. They wonder where they go. How do you explain that? You usually don't. Or you make excuses for the other people. Maybe they're busy. Sometimes people grow apart. Except this story for autistic families, it's all too common. People disappear because they theoretically care, but intention into action is a different thing altogether, and our oddities just don't fit about how other people want things to be. And I share this because if it happens to me and my family, then I know it's happening to many of you too. The message we want to receive is we love your child, but the message we actually receive is we love your child as long as we don't have to adjust for him. We hear we're proud of your journey as long as it doesn't interfere with our comfort. That's not inclusion. That's social ghosting. And for families like ours, that silence is deafening. So no, this episode wasn't just about ketchup, although it was the star condiment in today's discussion. It's about how every little thing that should be a little thing can sometimes turn into something bigger due to sensory processing issues that with a little care and concession could be avoided, but often turn into incidents of negative experiences that ultimately result in exclusion because your differences and requests for accommodations were just too much or too odd for others to deal with. And we all need to be better about noticing when we expect others to cope the way we do and to act the way we do. And realizing that just because something doesn't bother us doesn't mean that that agitation isn't real for someone else. Your lived experience is your own and doesn't necessarily translate to anyone. And if you really want to advocate and be a true ally for neuroinclusion, it's all about expanding your capacity to accommodate others even when we don't fully understand the need. Not justification, just care. That's real empathy. And that's how we build a world that actually lives up to the word neuroinclusion. I want to thank you all for spending this time with me, because you need to know that you're not asking for too much. You may just be asking the wrong people, and it's finding the right space where you never have to ask twice. This season, we're going to keep naming these challenges. We're going to keep telling the hard truths, and we're going to keep creating a space for difference, for dignity, and for possibility. Thank you for listening to this episode of Think Differently. I hope you found our discussion today insightful and thought-provoking. I want to thank Audio Work Studios for their exceptional production and recording support. Without their expertise and dedication, this podcast would not be possible. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Your support helps us to reach new audiences and promote neurodiversity in our world. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform so that you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. We look forward to seeing you again soon on Think Differently.